Hi, Lyndsey. Can you just introduce yourself and a little bit about how you got to where you are now, and maybe how Odyssey of the Mind was part of that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Lindsay Wheeler. I am the co-founder of SuperNow. We are a platform for live interactive learning adventures for kids ages 4 to 10. We actually got started during the pandemic in 2020. At the very beginning of the pandemic, as a virtual summer camp, me and my co-founder were running a different business at the time. It was an in-person events-based business, which obviously was not COVID proof. And so we took the pandemic as an opportunity to pivot in a big way, and so we started Super Now initially as it started almost as like a side hustle that turned into the real business that we were working on, and we really were inspired by the people in our lives with kids who were really struggling to keep their kids educated, entertained, busy while they were working, like all of those those really emotional problems that were sort of flaring, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. And those people were only the options for them in a time when there was no school, virtual, everything hadn't been set up yet. Was like, should I put my kid in front of YouTube, or should I put my kid in front of computer games, or is there something better? So that's how we got started at SuperNow. We actually have evolved a lot since then, just given the kind of changing landscape of like what parents and kids have needed over the last 2 years. So we evolved from the summer camp to a model of an unlimited class model where much more flexibly people could drop into classes on their own time, where whenever worked for their schedule after school. And we've really functioned more as like extracurricular creativity, imagination inspiring type content that has learning baked into it, but isn't necessarily like sitting in front of your Zoom class learning Common Core. And that has kind of enabled us to do it in a really magical story and character driven way, which has kept kids, coming back and loving it and falling in love with all of the recurring characters that we've developed in-house. We create all the content in-house with a team of creatives and educators. I was an Odyssey kid, so I did Odyssey of the Mind, I think like in elementary school, and then I did it in high school. I like stopped and then I did it in high school. And I think I always define myself as a really creative person. And after college, I was looking for a job that would allow me to exercise that creativity, but also like develop strategic skills, and not because I didn't want to just like go purely into like, writing for TV or directing movies or those kinds of like creative jobs. And so I started my career in innovation consulting, which basically I was doing new product, service, experience, design, and strategy for like consumer brands. So everything from designing the next Hot Pocket SKU to like digital products for Nike and everything in between that. And it was really fun. It was perfectly like a match of creative and strategic thinking. But ultimately, I just want to get closer to building businesses and get closer to startups. And so I worked in tech. I worked at Rent the Runway for a few years, large tech startup. And that's where I met my co-founder, and that's where we kind of jumped off into the deep end and started building businesses together. So that's where I started and where I am now.
I love it. Obviously, like the entrepreneurial skill set and the desire to work and found your own company is a little bit different than working for a large tech company or working in innovation consulting. What specifically drew you to entrepreneurship, and what sparked the desire to found your own company?
I think it's like the most interesting kind of work for me is work that really allows me to like use lots of different skill sets, or like expose myself to a lot of different things. Like if I had to do the same job every single day, I would get really bored. And I found jobs like that prior to becoming a founder, but I would say that is like the thing that makes every single day exciting and interesting and unique. And so I would say that I think um, there's something just you can be more deeply creative when you're building something that is like your vision, or your and your partner's vision, and that's like, at the end of the day, we can shape what this product and what this experience looks like in a way that like I just would never have been able to do if I wasn't at building my own thing. And I think I like to work on problems that I think are like the most important or most interesting, or the things that I'm like most suited to solve. And so I think by going into entrepreneurship, you kind of by definition get to do that better.
Yeah. Um, how is it working with a co-founder? So both of you, I imagine at some point, agreed that you wanted to work on this idea together. And obviously, in Odyssey of the Mind, you have between six other teammates or around that number. So how is it with one teammate where you're really in it from the beginning and you have to really get along with the vision of the company?
I cannot imagine being a solo founder. Like, I think partnership is super important, and it helps to create like a much better um it's a more fun process because you're in it with another person or more than one person if you're building a larger team. But it's also way, I mean, building a business is hard, but I think it's a lot easier when you're sort of balanced by someone who has a different skill set than you. And so in my case, I sort of fill the creative consumer hat. Like I run a lot of our research. I run our content team, and I have like a brand sort of perspective. And my co-founder is she does growth and the business side of things and finance, and we hold hands on strategy. Like we kind of come together and develop the strategy, and it's really nice to be able to have like the left and right brain working together. um and in this case, that's what our partnership is. We, because of the pandemic, have we've lived together multiple times through the pandemic, so we have like a very close relationship where we've like been working and living together, which is a unique circumstance. And I think it really does, like, it tries you, but it also is better, and you can make a lot faster progress that way. And when it comes to decision making, I think we respect each other and each other's sort of areas of expertise. So we have like a healthy sort of rapport. But if it comes down to something that like she knows, if it's a content thing or a creative thing, she'll be like, I have this opinion, but I trust you if you feel strongly that it's not that, and vice versa. Um, Oftentimes we're like in each other's brains though. So we're like in cahoots very often.
I love it. No, it's
Yes.
that's really cool that you have that type of relationship. And you know, I have worked with coworkers who are also close friends, and I've also lived with coworkers who are close friends, and it has
Yeah,
pluses and minuses. You're always kind of around
totally.
work, and you have a
Totally.
different type of
Totally.
trust. But sometimes you're like, man, I wish we could not be around work things all the time.
I know, I know. I think with it when it's like your own business, like it's sort of it's a reminder. It's like this is your life. Like you're living with your co-founder. This is your life is your business. Um but no, totally. It's definitely, though, for me at least, been like a really positive force and shaping what we're doing.
Yeah. So you also mentioned some of the changes that in your strategy that you've made since you founded, and as you might remember with Odyssey of the Mind, you first take a look at the problem, and you might have an initial idea for a theme or a skit or how you might design something, and then 3 months later, or maybe right before the regional tournament, you think, okay, I guess we're gonna do something different. We're gonna scrap that character. Uh,
Totally.
what's a moment like that you've had where you've really had to change quickly, or you've really evolved from what your first assumption was?
Yeah, I mean, out the gate, we started as a high price point product where parents were paying, I believe, $100 a week for basically 3 hours of content, live content for their kids a day. So one of those hours was like a super small group, very hands on, and then two of those hours were like larger format experiences. And we ran that way for the whole summer of 2020, and it went really, really well. And so we're like, oh, this is great. Like, people are paying us a lot of money because it's so great. And then moving into the fall, we started to see some seasonal churn. We're like, okay, there's going to be some churn, but like we quickly realized that the way that schools were, the situation with like virtual learning, all of these factors were making our experience of like you have to sign up for a certain number of days a week at a certain price point very inflexible, and thus not it didn't work for families. So we quickly it was a hard decision because you're making $100 a week, like then all of a sudden dropping a price point is scary. But we basically were like, this isn't the model that customers want anymore, and we figured this out through lots of interviews, surveys, and all that. And we had to decide, do we want to drop our price point, how do we want to shift the model? And so we ended up launching an unlimited subscription in February of 2021, and we made the decision in January. So it was like really quick. From January to February, we like built a quick new portal and all of that. And we dropped it to $18 a month and made it unlimited classes. So the value at that point was like, oh, I can drop them whenever I want. My kids are probably not going to attend as often, but that's okay. And we launched the subscription in February, and then leading into the summer of 2021, it was like definitely the right decision, but obviously like painful. Those kinds of shifts are painful. And then right now we're actually going through another sort of like pivot test kind of experience where we're experimenting with new mental models for how parents can consider us. So we call them live interactive classes because that's kind of the easiest way for a parent to sort of make sense of what we are. They're like, okay, like I come at a certain time. It's 5 o'clock. My kid's gonna go to this class with our super engaging magical characters. But really they're not like classes. It's not like going to violin class or going to art class. They're going on an adventure, and they get to interact live with the characters. But we've never really been able to communicate it in those ways, because when a parent's buying something, they're like, it's a class or what is it? And so we started experimenting with what are other ways that we could kind of engage with families and deliver value for them outside of the concept of like the unlimited class model. And so what we're doing, launching in a week, is something called Adventure Club, which is this idea of borrowing from some of the like subscription box companies where kids get like a box with projects in the box and then can do the projects whenever they want to. We're basically like testing a box with 4 projects and a monthly mission. So it's basically a mission in a box. And then the kids have access to on demand and live content to engage their experience and bring the mission to life. So they'll go to a weekly adventure show. They'll do the project in a live interactive class led by an instructor, and it'll advance them through a mission over the course of a month. And so it's a completely different like mental model, but we're going to see if that sort of resonates with the audience in a new way. But we're all about experimentation. That's kind of been the name of the game for the last 2 years.
Yeah, no, that's amazing that with your first story, with that radical of a change to your pricing model, and I can see how that would be really scary, to go from like a high price point that's throttled to an unlimited price point, or a limited model that with a much lower price point. And
Yeah,
yeah, especially with a pretty rapid change period over that. Say, okay, we're gonna do this over a month, or we're gonna make this decision in a month. And that's also really cool of
totally.
innovating in your products. You mentioned, or you might have mentioned prototyping, or experimenting with as you change these different things. Has there been a time when you've tried to do some small test case or small prototype before you've moved on to a much larger change?
Absolutely. I mean, we do a lot. It's the nice thing about the way that we are really, really customer driven. So we interview folks all the time, and we survey them all the time to understand like what if we're working for them, in what ways we're working for them, how we could be working for them in better ways. But something that's really unique to just like the the way that we're set up is we can basically put like, if I want to get insight from a child, or if I want to run some content in front of a kid audience, we can do that really easily. So an example is like, we just created some new really amazing, well produced episodic content for this new adventure club concept that I described. and we want to understand if the content like is gonna like how kids are gonna engage with it and how they'll respond, because we're already starting to write content for the next month. um, and so we're not launching that yet until later in February. And so tomorrow I emailed parents today. I was like, hey, we would love to have your child, this is like a small subset of kids, we'd love to have your child come to this special viewing basically, and we'll have the kids watch the show, and we'll observe them watching it, we'll ask the kids questions, and we'll basically just get like qualitative feedback around what they're liking about the episode and what could be better. And so that will directly inform the next month's content. And I mean, that kind of feedback loop, it's hard because it's with content, there's production time. So there's a little bit of lag. It's not like software where you can just push the next thing out. But I think it's easier than like, I don't know, manufacturing and that kind of thing, you know.
I'm getting strong Sesame Street vibes. I don't know if you've had that comparison, but it's like if Sesame Street was founded in 2020.
Totally. We actually talk about the way that we like talk about the business in shorthand is, imagine you if you could watch Sesame Street with thousands of kids from all over the world, but you can actually communicate with Elmo and like direct the experience more, so it feels like you're a character and you're not just like passively watching, and you are friends with Elmo and Elmo acknowledges you for being there. Like that's sort of the like dream. That's what we're trying to create for kids. And with this sort of feeling of it's a place where kids can be themselves, they can be creative, they can express themselves authentically. And like we have social and emotional kind of learning threads throughout the content in more like subtle ways.
Who doesn't want to be friends with Elmo? That would be the
Right.
best thing. And I bet you have an amazing
I
cast of
know.
characters who are just as cool, if not cooler. Um,
Totally,
that's really
totally.
amazing. I recently read Jim Henson's biography, and it's really cool how he and the rest of the team thought through Sesame Street and all of the learning innovations. And it's really cool to hear some similar threads, but for a modern digital audience that wants that type of personalized interaction and wants different
Totally.
types of stimulation or wants to feel special, but in like a customized way. And it's cool
Yeah.
to see those same things that excite kids, but reshaped and upgraded and tweaked. That's really exciting.
I gotta read that book.
Oh, it's long. I'll send you the link, but
Yeah.
it's a really great book.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So you're obviously in the education space, and you think about education a lot and learning pedagogy and all these different things. What benefits do you see for kids participating in Odyssey of the Mind and the types of skills or experiences that they're having, and how that influences their future and their educational attainment?
To me, like this business that I'm building is super inspired by my time in Odyssey the Mind, both like, you know, subconsciously or more consciously. Subconsciously, I think like, you know, creativity is not taught in school as part of like a core curriculum, but it is essential, like essential in life, especially when the world is changing so quickly, and like we have to be able to like develop creative solutions to problems in order to kind of continue surviving as a species. Um and um but so I think like, you know, school does not teach those kinds of skills, and I think Odyssey of the Mind does teach those skills. Those skills are translated. I mean, I'm taking those skills as a founder and building my business with it, but the like content itself of what we're teaching kids, it's kind of meta, I guess, where we do tons of like project based kind of like thinking outside the box, building, you know, creating plays, creating stories, all of that. um, we're instilling those values and those kind of activities in the curriculum at Super Now. So it kind of is like playing on two levels. um, I think it's interesting, like kids are not gonna, the jobs that kids who are in school right now are gonna do in the future, like don't even exist yet. They don't even really know. They're like, they could say what they want to be when they grow up, but like the job they actually will become is probably not even like a job yet. And so creativity and like problem solving, teamwork, public speaking, flexibility and adaptability, all the things that OM taught me, I think are going to be super directly applicable to like whatever they do in the future. And I think, and it's also fun and joyful. And I think there's something about that aspect that I try and bring to the culture of like my company. We want to create a space that's like really pro creativity. That's a place where people can sort of express and feel kind of comfortable, like, debating to get to the best kind of solution. So yeah, I mean, I think the benefits are immense. And I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to do it when I was a kid, because not every, I mean, a lot of people I know haven't had the opportunity.
That's a great pitch. I love it. I agree. Do you have any especially poignant memories from your time as an Omer? Maybe a particular problem you remember solving, or a backdrop, or a skit you wrote, or anything like that, just like really stands out.
Yeah, I think I was in like fourth grade. What was our problem? Our problem was, um, oh, it's called the ostrich factor. I think ostrich something. And basically the problem was some character in the like skit had to, like, when they stuck their head down, they basically like left the scene or something like that. I don't know. But our I think our story was kind of bad, but it had something to do with like playing at Carnegie. There was a performance at Carnegie Hall. It was something very silly, and the conductor kept like putting their head down as the ostrich for the ostrich factor. But the thing that I'm a violinist, and I didn't know, like, I think you can actually legally play musical instruments in the skit, and it doesn't like count towards your monetary value. But I didn't know this, and I was like 8 or 9 or something. So instead of like bringing our instruments, instead we recorded ourselves playing the instruments and then made like little replica violins that were really good for fourth grader quality. Like they looked like a real violin. And we ended up winning a Renata Fusco award for the violins. Actually, we did not place in the actual competition, but I think it was like so good. I had it in my bedroom for like a decade after that. Like it was just like hanging in my bedroom, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's like a lasting OM memory that my parents probably still have it.
I love it. No, I have a couple props that have stayed around that I don't have the heart to throw away, and
Yeah.
I built a large horse as part of a Lancelot costume, and I still have the
Oh my
horse
god,
head, and I like mounted it on my wall, and it's still
that's
in like my
amazing.
parents' house, and they're like, when are you gonna get rid of that horse head? I'm like,
You're
that's
like, I'm never gonna
I'm
get rid
never
of
gonna
that.
get rid of it. It was amazing. The judges loved it. It got tens. It
That's
holds this place
amazing.
in my heart.
It's really amazing, like that there's such like, I don't know, that it's gone, that it, continue. It's decades and decades old of a program, but I think it's just really like, it's very unique, it's very special.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point of the problem formats haven't changed that much. I mean, I competed in the early 2000s. I've spoken to alumni who competed in the 80s and the 90s. Um, and the basic idea of having a long-term problem where it's cost restricted, and no outside assistance, and there's multiple paths to solve it, and then having a spontaneous problem. What I think is great is as uh, education theory has changed, as what common core should be, all these different changes in education, honestly the mind has been relatively timeless, and I think it speaks to the idea of creativity is inherently flexible, and you don't just have one
Hmm.
way to learn it.
Hmm.
And if you have a relatively open-ended problem, then it can survive different changes in things, or different research, or whatever. And I think that's really, really
Absolutely.
special, that we can have the same thread for 40, 45 years.
Yeah, totally.
Do you have any stories of when something didn't quite turn out like you thought it would? Maybe a spectacular failure, or something went up in flames, or the night before you stepped on something you didn't want to have stepped on. Anything like that, and how'd you deal with that?
I think like in general, we were just way more down to the wire, like always, than we thought we would be, like than we should have been. And I think that like I did it in elementary school, and then in my sophomore year of high school, we like did it again just for fun. And I think we had like a multi-day sleepover leading up to the competition because we like, when you're in elementary school, you're like, there's more structure probably applied by your parents to like go to practice and work on your thing. But in high school, we were like, not being coached really. We were kind of like our own coaches. I don't remember any like miserable failures of the actual competition, luckily. But yeah, I also do remember my dad was the coach when I was in elementary school. So I do remember a lot like going down in the basement and like working on it alone, like when it wasn't practice time. Like we're painting our sets or like building our stuff. Like I was just kind of like doing it because I liked it a lot. But yeah, I think that was it's a really great exercise. I mean, it's like to your point, you were talking about like cost constraint, like creativity, like in the face of like, you're a lot of ways to solve a problem. It's really like similar to running a startup in a really micro way. Like you are really budget constrained. You have a limited amount of time. You have to prove something really quickly. You have a small team that has to all rally together and like be sort of moving towards the same thing. It's really like I guess like running my business now is like, and we're at our seed stage, so we're a small business. Is kind of the adult like version of OM.
I love it. No, as I've worked in startups the last 5 or 6 years, and have a lot of friends who are in the space, and I think you're right on with that. And even at other companies that I've worked at, that are larger, sometimes I still feel like, okay, just life is a big Odyssey of the mind problem, and I
Yes,
can I can take what I've learned here and apply it. Whether I'm in a big warehouse and managing box allocation and volume flow, and I have to be spontaneous about my labor allocation, or it's like, okay, I have
totally.
no idea how to do this new software implementation, so I'm going to try a couple things out and see what sticks.
I also think it's like character building for kids because I was like I have gotten more sort of change is inevitable. You kind of have to just go with the flow, be flexible as a person. Like I've gotten way more that way as an adult, but I think it's really easy for kids to get super rigid in their routine and the way they do things. And like this is sort of an exercise in like letting go and having to like adapt, which is really it's like an important skill to develop that you don't really there's not like a way to learn it like in school or anything. Um, so I do think there's like character benefits as well.
Yeah. What advice would you give someone, an Omer who wants to go into startups? Either skills to develop, or uh, you know, go your path, or maybe not go your path, for someone who eventually wants to start their own business.
My advice is like to follow your like curiosity because I think that the advice that people normally get about just like do what you love is very that is can be really intimidating when people don't necessarily know what they love yet. Like they're trying to figure out what they love. Like there's not such I don't think there's such a thing as like one singular like life's work. And so I would say like follow your curiosity. I think that advice applies to OM too. It's like you could do this problem in a million ways. So like follow the thing that you're most curious about and it will lead you to a solution. It may not be the like most elegant solution, but it is a solution. And I think that the like flexibility and the like constant iteration. I never did one of the like balsa wood projects. Like that wasn't my jam. But I think that the process I assume around that is like test things. You gotta just keep testing, test, and eventually you'll get to like the best possible structure is sort of how I think about like startups. Like what we're doing now is at the seed stage is testing a series of tests that ideally get us closer and closer and closer to product market fit. And so if you are comfortable with that idea of like you're going to test into something, you're not going to know it's not going to be perfect right away. you may be wrong. We were wrong. We were right until we were wrong with the last kind of iterations of the business. It worked for a time, and then we had to evolve. And I think that, like, if you can get comfortable with that and not be afraid of it, that's like the most like liberating way to go into building businesses.
I like the differentiation between um, like follow your passion and follow your curiosity, because like you said, it's very intimidating for someone, especially if they're young or they don't really know what they want to do, to be like, okay, well, I don't, my passion changes, my passion feels like emotion
Totally.
on a day to day, but
Totally.
things that just interest me is less intimidating, and it gives room for, I might be curious about this for a little bit and then I might be satiated, and that's fine, and I can go on to another thing, um, versus thinking, okay,
Definitely.
I have to figure out that, I really want to solve this type of energy crisis, and like that's my whole life is going to be, you know, energy efficiency and
Yeah,
solar panels. And it's like
totally.
maybe after a year, you're like, I don't
Totally.
really like solar panels anymore. I want to do
Well, I think
new things.
I've got I've gotten like when I was younger, I would I would do a lot of like informational interviews of people who I thought had like cool careers, and I'd be like, how did you get here? And hearing their story, their like reflection on how they got to where they are, where they currently were, I would always be like, well, that's so perfect. Like every step along the way, like perfectly led you to where you are now. Like, how did you know to take all those steps? And the reality is they didn't know. And actually they're just retrospectively telling a story that makes sense in retrospect. And I could do the same thing. Um, but I think being okay with that, like being okay with like there's going to be a lot of chapters to your story, and that's okay, is like part of the fun and the adventure. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think like the theme is really just like adapt, change, flexibility, like and sort of making the most with what you have. That has like been a big theme in my entrepreneurial journey. I would say it's probably been a theme of the last few years, given the circumstances that, I think a lot of people who have like have been figuring it out. That's probably like a thing that they've realized. Um, but I think it's valuable.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you, Lyndsey, so much for taking the time to chat. I really appreciate you. I wish Super Now the best of luck. Sounds like you're doing really cool
Thank
things,
you.
and
Thank you
I bet
so
you're going to
much.
do amazing stuff.